Hello, I'm
Hi.
Ilona Varo, and I am so happy to be joined by my good friend and therapist, Gayane. And we are going to be chatting about how to thrive through the holiday season. That is kind of the whole series that we are doing. And we're going to focus on parenting and relationship, keeping your relationships healthy through the holidays, and some parenting insights through the holidays. But before we jump in, if you can kind of give us a little 30, 60-second intro of who you are and what your focus is.
Sure. My name is Gayane Aramyan, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I specialize in perinatal mental health and couples therapy. And my office is in Sherman Oaks, and I also see clients virtually across California.
Amazing. Love
Yeah.
it. And your office already itself is so soothing and
Thank
serene.
you. Thank you.
So let's dive in. What are the main stressors that you see your clients or friends even dealing with around the holiday season when it comes to relationships and parenting?
I think with parenting, one of the main things that I see, especially with moms, I mean, I do typically see moms as my clients, and then I'll see the couple, right? So I don't get to hear the dad's point of view as much. But the moms are always really stressing about making traditions and just having this like perfect holiday. And it comes from several things, right? Like some of them maybe didn't have that growing up, and so they're trying to create new memories and kind of heal that inner child. Or they grew up with having all these traditions and having all these things happen, and so they want to recreate that. And the problem is that we live in such a different world, and usually most of the moms are working, and even if they're not working, they're having to upkeep a house and have all these other tasks. So there's so much on their plates already that the holidays are a huge stressor for parents.
Definitely. The
Yeah.
perfectionism, the
Yeah.
keeping up with tradition, image of what it looks like, comparison, how other parents are doing it. I
Instagram,
definitely, yes.
it's a blessing and a curse because you can
Yeah.
get your inspo or
Yeah.
you can sit and compare, right?
Yeah.
And I remember even personally during like the Halloween season, which is like yesterday, I we had all these things planned, and there's like, pumpkin patches, and then like Nights of the Jack, and there's another one in Descanso Garden, just like all these activities for kids to do. And we had three things planned out, and two of them are kind of the same thing, just in different locations. And I remember for one of them, we were gonna do that Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday, we are gonna have like birthday parties and all these things. And I remember looking at my calendar and saying, like, I need to drop one of these. Like, he's really not going to know if we go to Descanso Gardens or not. He's so happy he went to Nights of the Jack and the pumpkin patch. I need to mentally like do a check and see what's worth going and what's not. And just to take care of me and my stress levels, I texted our family. I was like, let's not do this one. And they're like, yeah, no problem. They were on board too. But doing something like that, I think, is so important during this season of like, your kid's really not gonna know.
hmm
I think that we need to remember that your child would rather have calm parent who doesn't do 100 activities
Yeah.
rather than a stressed out parent, but you take them to every single pumpkin patch or holiday celebration.
Yeah. The age-old rule of thumb, quality over quantity.
Absolutely.
Let's have two really nice events that we can make peaceful, calm,
Yes.
somewhat collected memories at instead of rushing to do 15 things and then not having any of them be super pleasant.
Absolutely. And it's hard. My son is now at an age where he's noticing certain things. Our neighbors decorated for Christmas and the holidays, and he was very sad, and he looked at their house and said, "How come we don't have decorations? And I still have just like pumpkins in front of the house." And I said, "Well, it's not, Christmas yet. We will eventually." And he was so sad. And so I went into a whole lecture about, like, we don't look at others and what they have. We appreciate what we have. And he was not having it. He was like, I want it in our house. I want it on our front yard. And so I had to take the therapist hat off, and I was like, I get it. I know you really want the decorations. We'll talk to daddy and come up with a plan and all of that. So now he's at an age where he sees certain things. So of
Yeah.
course that adds another stressor of like, okay, now we have to decorate the house. We have to do all these things.
Yeah.
Whereas before I could totally like I truly didn't have it in me to, and we lived in a smaller space. So I did minimal stuff for the holidays, but this year I feel the pressure because of his age, and now we have the space to like go all out. And it's so
Mhm.
stressful. It really
Mhm.
is.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point about comparison, how to talk to children about comparison, especially when there's such a variety of means and accessibility to things and the competition, the keeping up. I know so many parents struggle with, well, I want to get my kid the latest thing or the thing that all the other
Yeah.
kids that age are really wanting.
Yeah.
How do you talk to parents about that pressure to keep up, the pressure to maybe accumulate things and the stigma that comes with having the popular toy of the season? How do you talk to kids about that?
Yeah. And I think it's such a great example of what he said to me about the neighbor's front yard versus ours. That's like the most innocent, like as a kid, you just compare to your neighbor or maybe
Mm,
your classmate. But
yeah.
as an adult with a phone, we're now comparing ourselves not just to our neighbors or classmates, but like 7 billion people in the world. So I think just that alone can show you like how much we do compare and how much accessibility we have to people's lives. But I'm a big believer in less is more. I don't, I mean, with the holidays coming around, I'm just like I always have this anxiety of the abundance of toys we're gonna get. And he already has so many, and I'm a big believer in like I get him toys usually for like birthdays or the holidays. And in between, I'll get like a developmental toy, something that, is going to help him learn something. I'm not a big believer in like rewards or having the latest thing, just because I think that's not what life is,
Uh-huh.
I really want to instill for him to appreciate everything else, appreciate what he has already. But it's really hard, I think, with especially I think the older generation, like our families, that's how they show love. And I try not to get in between that because that's their thing, and of course it makes everybody happy. But it's hard. It's hard to try to, I think what's happening with parents, couples, during this time, everyone's trying to like create the best of the best, right? While also breaking some generational cycles. And I think it's really difficult. And that's what adds on to the stress. It's not just the holidays, it's like so much deeper than that, too.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think there's too young of an age to talk about gratitude for what you have instead of longing for what you want, perhaps?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know how much my 4-year-old is conceptualizing, but I just keep talking about it. I remember one time I said, we should be thankful for the toys that we have because there are some kids that don't have toys. And he was like, truly, he got so sad and he goes, but that's really sad. And I said,
Oh,
yeah, it is
yeah.
sad.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
great.
eventually it clicks for them.
Yeah,
Of course, he's also at an age where he's like, I have the best one and mine is better. And that's developing,
right, right, right.
which is really interesting to see. So I think if you start talking about it from a young age, I mean, every night we also like do a little prayer slash gratitude moment with him. And we say like what we're thankful for the day. And again, a 4-year-old's mind is sometimes he says things like, I'm thankful for loveness, whatever that means. He says
Sweet.
that.
Sweet.
Sometimes it's as simple as like, I think he says, I'm thankful for my bed, and things like that.
Great.
But we're trying to instill that, and I don't think it'll click until a certain age, but I don't think there is you can even talk to your 1-year-old about it.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think you really highlight the fact that it's important for parents to be aligned and on the same page around how they want to celebrate the holidays, what the values are, what kind of memories you want to make. I think that kind of an aligned force is really important. And at the end of the day, you are modeling the behavior. So if you're not regulated, if you are yourself engaging in comparison and perfectionism and all these things, of course the children are going to feel it. So maybe that's just something to keep in mind, is that you do have a lot of influence as a parent. And so just really that should highlight the importance of your own self-care and self-regulation and making sure you're taking care of yourself during this season.
Yeah, and again, less is more, right? I think that you need to look at what, what you have planned out, and if it brings up stress and anxiety, maybe you can take one thing off your list. If you're hosting, try to do a lot of self-care and not put the pressure that everything has to be perfect, because it will
Yeah,
never be. And if
yeah,
you're doing it to create this tradition and memories for your kids, again, if they're seeing a mom running around chaotic and stressed out and anxious, that's not really getting getting to your goal, right? So
yeah,
I think it's important to like think about, okay, what's the point of this?
yeah,
Oh, it's to create memories. Okay, well, am I aligned with that value or am I completely off? And I think that's
yeah,
a good question to think about.
yeah, yeah. Something that always resonates with me is having an intention and then also fact checking the impact of, like, okay, this was my intention, but what is the impact of what I'm actually engaged in
Yeah.
behaviorally or emotionally, and making sure that those two things are aligned.
Yeah, I think people forget to check in about it, and
Mhm.
they think it's for this destination of a feeling, or and then they don't realize that the journey is just completely off.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit for the last few minutes to talk about the stresses that couples feel during the holiday season. I know you work a lot with couples. What do you tend to see in your office? What shows up during this season?
A lot of expectations,
Okay.
whether it's about gift giving or how they're going to spend the holidays, who they're going to spend the holidays with. There's a lot of miscommunication. And I really think that's the key issue, is that couples aren't talking about these things. And then when the time comes, they're not aligned on something, and that's usually when fights happen. So
Mm,
I want to say that one of the most important things you can do before the holidays is start talking about these things. Because when you're in it, things are already really heightened and it's like kind of last minute. And I don't think
mhm,
anyone's going to be rational during that time.
mhm,
But if you can start talking about these things beforehand, like even about gifts, right? I think oftentimes people want to be surprised, and then they get a gift and they're like, I don't even like this item, and it
mhm,
just takes away from the whole thing. So I think if like gift giving is not your love language, talk about that. Would you rather have an experience as your holiday gift? Would you rather take a cooking class? Unless you talk about that, your partner is not going to magically read your mind.
yeah, mind reading in couples, that's definitely something we see so often. And
Yeah.
it's such a simple fix, but it's certainly not easy. Asking for our needs, I think speaking up is the number one challenge I see with my clients. Is there's a freeze, there's a shutdown. I literally can't speak up. The words
Yes.
don't come out. I'm just stuck or frozen and not being able to speak my needs. What kind of advice would you say to someone going through that experience?
I think taking a step back and instead of, immediately going and trying to talk to your partner and you're having the flooding happen, take a moment to get to know what you even want and need yourself before approaching your partner. So get a pen and paper and sit down with your thoughts, right? Like, I think sometimes we get upset and get flooded with emotions, not even knowing what we need from our partner. So I think that
Yeah.
check in with yourself is really important. And you might figure out, like, you know what? This year, I really want to spend time with his family instead. And, maybe next year we can switch it off. And that's something I'm going to communicate.
Mhm.
Or for as a gift this year, I really want to take that cooking class. Like, let me let him know that. Or give something I like to do also. So then there's some sort of a surprise element in there, is write down like 10 things or 5 things, right? Experiences or items or whatever it is, and give that to your partner. So at least they have somewhat of an idea.
Yeah.
Instead of being just like trying to just get something and thinking you
Yeah.
might like it and then having that disappointment happen.
Yeah, yeah, and I really like the fact that you touched on the fact that there's different love languages, and so I think sometimes ego gets in the way and we get really self-righteous of, well, they should know because
Yeah.
I know what they like and they want, so they should, and then jumping to conclusions, they must not really love me or they must not care. So there's just such a rabbit hole of challenges and confusion that people fall into because there's an assumption that their partner should love them the way that they
Yeah.
love their partner. There's a lot of room for error, and people vastly underestimate the power of writing things down
Yeah.
and pouring out your thoughts and sitting with it. I mean, I am so known to just write a letter because as a professional, I still find myself being like, oh, this is hard
Yeah.
to say out loud. This is hard to ask for. And so writing it down, sitting with it, seeing how these words resonate when I read it back, rehearsing, practicing, making sure that the words you're using really conveys the message you want. It's not just emotion, it's not reaction. It's such a valuable tool, and I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves to just be able to do it without needing to practice or rehearse or use skills. And
Yeah.
that's just ego getting in the way. So
Absolutely.
check the ego, use some skills. This is what we're here for. This is what we teach all day every day. And there's a reason we need to practice these skills.
Yeah, and I always say, we weren't given these tools growing up just
Yeah,
because nobody talked about assertive
right.
communication or feelings. And so we weren't taught to know what we feel, to know what we need. And so we're kind of having to relearn all of that, which is why it doesn't come naturally.
Yes, absolutely. And the willingness to be a beginner and get it wrong and try again, that is also incredibly valuable. I think a lot of people trip themselves up when they practice a skill and it doesn't go as smoothly as, let's say, it did in therapy. And so then they beat themselves up and then they jump to the conclusion of, well, I just can't do this or this didn't
Right.
work for me.
Yeah.
So having grace with ourselves to practice, to begin again, to try again is also, I think, very underrated.
Yeah, and it's a new way of being. So yes, absolutely trial and error, you're not going to get it right. Even if you practice assertive communication, your partner might not know what assertive communication is. And so
Right?
it doesn't guarantee a perfect outcome. It just means that it lessens the chances of it going wrong. But nothing guarantees a perfect outcome.
Yeah. And what is assertive communication for those tuning in that might also be like, oh, that sounds great, but what is
Yeah.
it?
Assertive communication is when you're direct, but you're respectful. And you're talking about your needs, you're asking, something from your partner, but it's not done in an aggressive way. You're not attacking, you're not blaming, and it's not done in a passive way. So passive communication would be if you ask me what's wrong and I say nothing, nothing is wrong, right? And that's kind
But
of
you say
passive
it with
aggressive.
the attitude and the
Yeah,
tone, but
that's kind of
clearly,
passive aggressive. Nothing, I mean, passive would be if you just like stay silent and not say anything. And so assertive communication would be, something really bothered me and I'm feeling really flooded right now, emotionally flooded. Let's come back in like an hour and talk about it.
yeah,
That's assertive communication.
beautiful.
And so, yeah, it's definitely it's a skill that needs to be learned. Most of us weren't given that tool growing up, and it's something that we need to learn to better our relationships.
Yeah, yeah. And you just brought up another great point. The tone, the time, and the place also
Yeah.
really matters. So being mindful that maybe when your partner comes home from work, a long day of work, when they walk through the door, that might not be the best
Yes,
time. That is probably not the best time to start
yes,
with, like, let's talk about
no,
XYZ. So
yeah,
knowing the time, knowing the place, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I was trained to also ask, check in, is this a good time for me to talk about something
yes.
that might be activating or challenging or that I feel a lot of emotion around? Do you have the time and the space? Are you able to hold a conversation right now?
Absolutely. That's definitely an important tip
Yeah.
because again, going back to you can't read your partner's mind, right? And you don't know what we call them filters, right? You don't know what filter they're coming in with. Is it a hard
Hmm.
day at work? Is it they're feeling a little bit sick? Like we don't know what's going on internally. So having that little check-in of is this a good time, I think is a wonderful tip.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for giving us a little insight into ways to thrive through the holiday season. If you're in a relationship, new or long term, if you're a parent, I think you highlighted some really important things for people to keep in mind and be aware of and be on the lookout for, and maybe try something different this holiday season.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We will see you soon. Actually, really quickly also, how can people what are your handles for social media so they can
Sure. It's
follow?
at Therapy with Guyana. That's my Instagram. And then you can find my website, therapywithguyana.com.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you
Yep.
so much.
Bye.
Bye.